Welcome back to BioMindscape. Today we are going to know about the factors that affect the photosynthesis. So factors that affect the photosynthesis are the photosynthesis is not controlled by a single factor. It really depends on several internal and external conditions that are working together. At any moment, the factor present in the least favorable among become the limiting factor and control the overall rate of the photosynthesis. The idea is expressed by Blackman's law of limiting factor. Rate of photosynthesis is directly proportional to most limiting factors. Now, for example, even if the light and CO2 are available, photosynthesis will remain slow, and if temperature is too low, because enzyme cannot function efficiently, so the light provide the energy that is required for the photosynthesis. There are three important aspects that affect the light quality, light intensity, and the duration of light. Light quality, like the wavelength and color of light. Light intensity, the brightness of light, and the duration, how long the plant receives the light. Effect of light intensity, like at lower light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases almost linear, because more proton excite more chlorophyll molecule. So in this NCERT graph we can see that y is equal to x upon 1 plus x. So here the curve represents the rapid rise in initially following by saturation. Like there's the region A, region B, and region C, and region D. So region A, it shows light is limiting, so photosynthesis increases rapidly, whereas if we see the region B, here the saturation point begins, and in region C, further increase in the light does not increase photosynthesis, because another factor like CO2, temperature, enzyme become limiting, and region D, where the light saturation intensity is given. Most plant reach light saturation at about 10% of the full sunlight. Therefore, in natural condition, light usually does not limit photosynthesis except the dense forest and the shade region. Very high light intensity is given. If very high light intensity is given, then the chlorophyll, excessive light can damage the chlorophyll molecule and photosystem. So this is photooxidation or photoinhibition that results in the chlorophyll breaking and reduce the photosynthesis. Then CO2 concentration is also an important factor. It affecting factor like CO2, carbon dioxide concentration. CO2 is a raw material for CO2 carbon fixation in the Kelvin cycle. Atmospheric CO2 concentration is very low, that is about 0.03 to 0.03 to 0.04%, and above that, above this particular percentage, and hence the CO2 is often the major limiting factor in photosynthesis. What is the effect of the increasing in CO2? Increasing CO2 concentration up to about 0.05%, it will increase the photosynthesis, because the rubisco get more substrate. But excessive, if there is high CO2 concentration for long period, it can be harmful. Like in C3 and C4 plant, if we see example, C3 plants like wheat, rice, potato, they show strong response to increasing the CO2 photorespiration and lower efficiency at the high temperature. This photosynthesis saturates only at a high CO2 concentration. And C4 plants like maize, sugarcane, they possess Kranz anatomy, PEP carboxylase, CO2 concentration mechanism. So they already maintain a high concentration. They maintain a high concentration CO2 level. Hence, if there is less response to external CO2, that will increase. Because of the less response, the CO2 will increase, and very low photo respiration is there. Then there is high efficiency in the strong light and heat. Then other things are like greenhouse application, like greenhouse air will with the CO2 to increase the productivity in the crop like tomato, bell pepper. These are the examples that are given in NCERT, and this improve the CO2 carbon fixation, like growth, yield of the crop, the growth of the crop. Then temperature is also one of the most important factor, where the photosynthesis is enzyme mediated, especially the dark reaction well Kelvin cycle. Therefore temperature is strongly affected. Why temperature matter? Because enzyme work best with an optimum temperature. range. At lower temperature, enzyme all activity slows down, ATP utilization decreases, photosynthesis becomes slow. And if the temperature is very high, the enzyme denature and the stomata will close, and photorespiration will increase. Then if we see the response of the C3 and C4 temperatures, response C4 plant, it have a high optimum temperature, better adapted to the tropical climate and faster photosynthesis at high temperature, and C3 plant have low optimum temperature and better adapted to the temperature ranges. If there is water, water is the reactant in the light reaction, but its effect is most indirect. How water deficient reduce photosynthesis? Like stomatal closure. Water stress causes stomata to close to prevent water loss, that result in the less CO2 enters the leaf and carbon fixation decreases. Wilting, like leaf loss the turgidity and wilt, which result in reduced leaf surface area and less light absorption. Metabolic disturbance, several dehydration damage like chloroplast, enzyme, membrane system. Thus, photosynthesis decline sharply. Photosynthesis depends on the interaction of all factors like light, CO2, temperature, water. Like in light, the energy source, it is the main role in the energy source. In CO2, it is the carbon source. In temperature, it helps in controlling the enzyme activity, whereas water, it maintains the stomata and metabolism. So even if all the factors are optimum, the factor in minimum availability control the rate of photosynthesis, and this is the essence of Blackman's law of limiting factor. Now what are the important lines that are given in NCERT? Let's see. So in NCERT there is a given line about the factor that affect the photosynthesis. Here the law of limiting factor, it states that if a chemical process is affected by more than one factor, then its rate will be determined by the factor which is the nearest to its minimal value. So it is a factor which directly affects the process of its quantity in change. For example, despite the presence of green leaf and optimum light, the CO2 conditions and the plant may not photosynthesize. And if the temperature is very low, what will happen? This leaf, if it is given an optimum temperature, it will start the photosynthesis, and if there is no light, then it will don't photosynthesize. Like there is low light, so no photosynthesis will occur. Light have an important effect on photosynthesis. So here we need to distinguish between the light quality, light intensity and duration. What are the important factors? Light quality, light intensity and the duration of light. So how much duration, how much intensity and how much quality amount of light is given, that affect the leaf growth. Then these are the next point is there is a linear relationship between incident light and CO2 fixation. Here we can see a light intensity and rate of photosynthesis on y-axis. So here it is showing linear relationship between the incident and CO2 fixation rate and lower light intensity. At high light intensity, gradually the rate does not show fully increase as the other factor become limited, as we can see in the figure. So what is interesting to note in this light saturation that occurs at 10% of the full sunlight. Hence, except for this plant in a shade or a dense forest, light is rarely a limiting factor in nature. Increase in the incident light beyond a point cause the breakdown of chlorophyll and decrease in the photosynthesis. Then CO2 concentration, it have a very important role in it is a major limiting factor for photosynthesis. The concentration of CO2 is very low in the atmosphere, that is between 0.03 and 0.04%. So increase in the concentration up to 0.05%. We have discussed all these points earlier. So 0.05% can cause an increase in the CO2 fixation rate. Beyond this, the level can become damaging over longer periods. So here we have discussed about the C3 and C4 plant. C3 and C4 plant, they respond differently to the CO2 concentration. At lower light condition, neither group responds to high CO2 conditions, and if there is a high light intensity, both C3 and C4, both C3 and C4 plants show increase in the rate of photosynthesis. So why it is important? Because C4 plants show saturation at about 360, while C3 responds to increased CO2 concentration, and saturation is seen. We can see the saturation that is beyond 450 L inverse. Thus current availability of CO2 level is limiting to the C3 plant. So the fact that C3 plant responds to high light, if the C3 plant have high CO2 concentration, it will have high increase in the photosynthesis that lead into the high productivity. And it has been used for some greenhouse crops like tomato, bell pepper. So they are allowed to grow in a CO2 carbon dioxide enriched atmosphere that leads to higher yielding. Then temperature. The darker the reaction begins, enzymatic are temperature controlled. So though the light reaction also temperature sensitive, they are temperature sensitive, so they are affected to a much lesser extent. C4 plants responds to higher temperature and show a light rate of photosynthesis, while C3 plant have much lower temperature, that is optimum. Then so temperature is also one of the most important factor here. So temperature optimum for photosynthesis of different plant also depend on the habitat that they are adapted to. Like tropical plant have high temperature optimum pH that the plant adapt to the temperature. Then water. Even though water is one of the reactant in the light reaction, the effect of the water as a factor is more though its effect on the plant rather than the direct of photosynthesis. Water stress causes the stomata to close, hence reducing the CO2 availability. Beside, water stress also make leaf wilt and thus reducing the surface area of the leaf and their metabolic activity as well. So green plant make their own food by photosynthesis, and during this process the CO2 form the atmosphere that is taken away by the leaf through stomata and used for making the carbon dioxide, participating in glucose and starch making. So photosynthesis takes place only in the green part of the plant, mainly the leaves. Within the leaves, the mesophyll cell have a large number of chloroplasts, and that is responsible for CO2 fixation. Within the chloroplast, the membranes are the site for the light reaction, while the chemosynthetic pathway occurs in the stroma. Photosynthesis has two stages, the light and reaction and the carbon fixing reactions. So all this reaction, in the light reaction, the light energy is absorbed by the pigment present in the antenna and the funneled to special chlorophyll A molecule that are the reactant center chlorophyll, and these are the two photosystem PS1 and PS2. PS1 has 700 nanometer absorbing chlorophyll A and 700 molecule adds at reaction center, while PS2 has P680 reaction center that absorb the red light at 680 nanometer. After absorbing light, the electrons are excited and transferred through the PS2 and PS1 and finally to the from NAD to form the NADH, and during this process a proton gradient is created across the membrane of the thylakoid. So breaking down of the proton gradient due to the movement through the F0 particle of the ATPase enzyme release enough energy for synthesis of ATP. Splitting of the water molecule is associated with PS2, resulting in the result of O2 and proton and transfer of the electron to PS2. So in the carbon fixation cycle, if there is a carbon fixation cycle, CO2 is added by the enzyme Rubisco to the 5-carbon compound RUBP that convert the 2 molecule of 3-carbon PGA, and this is then converted to sugar by the Kelvin cycle. RUBP is regenerated here. During this process, ATP and NADPH synthesized in the light reaction, they are utilized, and this Rubisco also catalyzed as a wasteful oxygenated reaction in C3 plant. Photorespiration like in photorespiration. Some tropical plants show specialized type of photosynthesis like C4 pathway. In this plant, the first product of CO2 fixation that takes place in the mesophyll is C4, the fourth carbon compound in the bundle sheet cell. The Kelvin pathway is carried out for the synthesis of the carbohydrate. So thanks for watching. Do like, share and subscribe BioMindscape.